Hello, I'm here today to talk to you about an evidence and gap map that we created as part of the IMMANA program and give you a little tutorial on how to use this cool tool and its components. This project was undertaken in collaboration with the Campbell collaboration, and IMMANA is funded by UK Aid and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I'm just going to give you a few different components. I'm just going to give you a very brief background and rationale for what we did and talk you through very briefly some of our methods. And then I'm going to give you a little tutorial on using the evidence and gap map and a little sneak preview of the web interface which will accompany this product in the end, and I'll lastly offer some just general guidance for use. So as we know, agriculture, food systems, and nutrition pathways are very complex and dynamic. They're hard to measure, and in the last decade especially, after the food price crisis of 2007 and 2008, there was a proliferation of new metrics and methods and tools that have been developed, particularly because of investments in this space. So we wanted to summarize these different innovations and then also use that summary to shape the next steps for IMMANA and also this particular research nexus as a whole. So we have two objectives in this project. We wanted to identify all these different tools and metrics and methods that came into being to help us research this space. And then we also wanted to highlight opportunities for future development to address gaps and also to take some of these newer developments into more widespread adoption. So I'm going to just very briefly describe what an evidence and gap map is. It's a type of evidence synthesis, and it shares aspects to both scoping and systematic reviews. So it's not necessarily exhaustive, but it is designed to be comprehensive, and it's built around a systematic search strategy. It's going to highlight evidence that exists and that doesn't exist. It's not going to allow you to do a meta-analysis or provide effect estimates or even tell you which items are good or bad or useful or not useful. It just will tell you what different tools, metrics, and methods exist in this space. And it's designed to be an interactive map. So the users can filter it by various categories. It can be subdivided and tabulated, and you can kind of delve into the micro data, and then you can zoom out and see the bigger picture in various ways. So very briefly, we used a broad search strategy that took us a while to make both specific and sensitive, and we covered two published literature databases, CAB Abstracts and Web of Science, and we also conducted a very extensive gray literature search of key websites, projects, and grant databases. We limited the search to the last 10 years, and this isn't because there aren't great innovations that were developed prior to this. It was mostly to correspond to the investments that were made after the food price crisis and keep the focus on the latest innovations. We screened reports that were related to either agriculture and food systems or with nutrition and nutrition-related health outcomes. We limited our search to tools, metrics, or methods that were developed or newly applied since 2008. And then we mapped all of these reports across 12 thematic domains, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later. These constitute the rows of the map against categories of tools, metrics, and methods, which are the columns. So it's quite tricky to get broad themes out of these very complex and dynamic pathways, and I just wanted to explain a little bit how we arrived at these 12 domains. We used existing conceptual frameworks from across the field, especially the most prevailing ones, and we tried to distill these down into these domains. Of course, there are overlaps, but we did work to code items on between 1 and 3 of these domains. So this is a very simplified flowchart. This will also change a bit as this is a living resource and we are going to build on it in the coming years. But just very briefly, we retrieved over 30,000 reports from the published literature databases as well as the gray literature repositories. And we screened, after removing duplicates, over 25,000 of those. We have to date about 850 items mapped, and these are there for your exploration. And as I said, we will be adding to this as we go along into IMMANA 2. So I'm going to talk now using the map. I'm going to talk you through ways to utilize it and to view it. And this link will be provided on the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy website. And it's an HTML file, so it can be opened and used. It's not live, meaning it's not linked to the database that we have, but it will be updated regularly. So just briefly, if I zoom out, you can see that the map is quite large. It's across a lot of different domains, and it gets to the point where you can't quite see it, but this is sort of the whole map from the broad visual perspective. And I'm just going to zoom in so you can see these headers. The columns are different categories of tools, metrics, and methods. So these two columns are the tools, and they're divided by technology tools, research, survey, and interview tools. And then they're further subdivided out here, as you can see. I can collapse these. If I don't want to see, for instance, technology tools, I can collapse these columns. And I can only look at metrics, for instance. Eventually, we're going to have a bit more additional functionality here as we collapse these, but for now, this is an update on even the previous one that we had, so we're happy about that. So then, here on the left-hand side, you can see the columns, and these are, these are our, doesn't want to scroll down. Okay, these are our thematic domains here on the left, and you can see that there is some double coding. So on the columns, each report is only given one of these categories on the type of tool, metric, or method, but on the left, they can get up to 3 codes. So the size of the bubbles correspond to the number of reports. And remember, in this map, we are mapping reports. So several reports or many reports may correspond to a single metric, method, or tool that we've identified as being new in this space in the last 10 years. But because different methods are used in different ways and they're adopted across settings, we really wanted to show the spread of that. So you will see these larger bubbles, and some of them are all about one metric, for instance. So as you can see, as I'm doing now, you can roll over each cell, and you see these color-coded bubbles. They are coded on for the stage of innovation. So some of the tools, metrics, and methods we identified are very nascent and just coming into use, and those would be, if they're very early on, they would be coded in blue for stage 1, the concept development and pilot, and then that goes all the way up to red, which is stage 4, which means that a tool, metric, or method has been widely adopted across the globe, usually. So if I click on this cell, I get basically a running bibliography that has its little color code for stage of innovation here, and I get the actual abstracts and titles and other important bibliographic information here. So I can look through all of these, or I can just look at the list here. I can search in this box up in the upper right-hand corner, And also, if I want, I can change what's included in that list. So I can add, for instance, if I want to see tools, metrics, and methods that also deal with value chains, I can add this in. And these two, in each one of these different groups, these are combined with OR. So this is value chains or primary food production. If I also want to see then methods, I can do that. But the type of tool and the domain, for instance, are going to be combined with AND. So this is anything that deals with value chains or primary food production, and that it's either a metric or an analysis or model. So that is quite handy if you want to get down into the weeds of the map. The other thing that I'm going to point out is that there are a couple different headers up here, and you can hide them or you can go into full screen mode. And there is going to be an About tab, which will give you a few pointers here. But the most interesting tab is this Filters tab. So I can change the style of the map. That's the most simple thing to do. So if I want a heat map or if I want a mosaic, I can do that. And it just changes the visual style of the map. The most common one is a bubble map, though. Secondly, I can, if I want to see only one or a subsection of different characteristics on the map, I can use these little filters. So if I want to see only tools that are used with individuals, I can select that, and then I get an updated map of only tools that are used specifically with individuals. And I see this very large bubble of dietary metrics, because what we usually measure in diets is an individual. You can always refresh to get back to the original map, or I can just unclick and then update it. I'll just give you a couple more examples of how these filters work. So we have on here filters for different settings or geographic applications, whether if you want to see only the tools, metrics, or methods, you can do that. Or for instance, if I want to see only the research outputs from IMMANA, I can update the map like this, and I can see just the different outputs of the last 5 years of funding. So there are a lot of different categories to explore. I want to mention one very specific thing. So this software is evolving, and it's really powerful, and it gives us the amazing ability to present this information visually. However, we can't necessarily nest in these filters. If you have different sort of parent categories and then subcategories or children of those, so if I have, for instance, dietary metrics, and I have then a group of healthy diet metrics, and I have a group of metrics only on children, and then I have food security metrics, I can't nest them yet. So right now, I have the parent categories just under, or the parent categories are in the first line here, and then there's a little tag for healthy diets underneath. Now they look like they're on the same level, but actually if I click healthy diets, all of these individual tools will show up in that, including the other category. But if I only want to see healthy diets, for instance, I can click that. Oops, and there were none in IMMANA, so we can refresh. And I can show you this same thing. So if I want to just see, for instance, the healthy eating index, I can do this. And it's down here in diets, and I see all of these different reports. It looks like 29. So I encourage everyone to play around with, and also as this is basically our soft launch of this product, we absolutely welcome different comments and feedback, and we're going to be offering some Q&As and other resources later on to help users make the most of this. So I'm just going to give you a sneak peek of the second functionality that we're going to offer, and I'm just going to do this very briefly. We're going to offer more tutorials about how to use this. But if you don't want to use the map, but you basically want to search all of the reports that we have compiled that are represented in the map, you can go to this link, which we'll provide, and it is password protected, but for now we'll distribute that as appropriate. And it's going to provide an ability for you to search as a user all of the different reports. And then also it has this cool functionality where you can run crosstabs. So you can look at, for instance, the geographic application of things against the stage of development, and maybe you can filter that by the microbiome or by a specific attribute that's been coded within the map. And it's very cool, and you can, even on this explore part, you can take a look at, for instance, how many different items are coded in each of these categories and run reports based on those. So more of this will be coming, but I just wanted to give you a very brief introduction to this additional functionality. So lastly, I just want to provide a few thoughts on how to use this tool. It covers a lot of ground across a lot of different domains and a lot of different categories of innovation, and it can be, I think, a bit overwhelming, and it's not going to, be a magic box that you can sort of reach into and get out simply any answer to any question. But it is a very powerful tool in that it summarizes all of these different reports that describe new applications of tools, metrics, or methods in the agri-health space. And I want everyone to remember that what's mapped are reports, and they cluster around either the same or similar methods, metrics, and tools. It's not a listing of individual innovations, but rather these groupings of application, because we're representing metrics, which are very discrete, as well as something more like methods, which is a bit more amorphous and could have been applied across a lot of different situations. And we'd like to also point out that well-populated categories does not necessarily mean that there are no gaps. One category could be dominated by a certain type of innovation, for instance, one kind of dietary metric, and it looks like that space is completely filled. But if you open it up and you start to really explore what's in that cell, it might show you that, for instance, there are 0 metrics, methods, or tools that are specifically designed for adolescents, say, or that there hasn't been any application on hygiene and sanitation. Rather, the whole water space is really dominated by things like the water footprint assessment. Similarly, gaps in this evidence and gap map can indicate that there are sufficient older methods. So maybe there's a very well-established method, and that's perfectly reasonable to achieve your research goals. But it also could mean that there really is a need for innovation in that area. So gaps need to be carefully considered. So when you use the evidence and gap map and its results, it's important not to prioritize topics and themes just based on the number of reports in any given category, but to delve into the different intersections, to really use it and open it and think about it and take a look at what is at the intersection of all of these different spaces. Lastly, I wanted to provide a few important links. The evidence and gap map, as well as different tutorials and presentations and support materials, are going to be provided on the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Health website, which is listed here in the slides, and it's also going to be where all of the requests for proposals for grants and fellowships are found. We also have a published protocol for this project, so you can find all of the different relevant details if you want to really delve into how we compiled this list and even our search strategy. You can take a look online. And then there's also a link to this web portal where you can start to explore the data yourself in a new way. So I would like to say very big thanks to our funders, UK Aid, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has come on board for IMMANA 2, and the whole team at IMMANA, as well as all of our excellent external advisors who have helped us produce this product, especially the Campbell collaboration.